Good morning, or good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are in this world. Have a good one. So today's topic I want to do is what DevOps engineers do. Okay, so am I a DevOps engineer? Not really. I am a thing engineer, anything engineer. And let me get to the crux. A lot of people who employ DevOps engineers or think they practice DevOps aren't really doing that, because when you hire, sorry about the noise, when people hire a DevOps person, they think automatically that this person should know, do everything, do it all, right? That's not the case. What DevOps is supposed to be is it's a practice really of combining all forces together to solve a problem and produce a very good outcome for the customer, whether it's an internal customer, meaning end users of who are using that application of some sort, or a service like virtual desktops, or if it's your client who's, you've produced an application, that application is on the mobile. And it's all about taking the barriers down and then producing one harmonious output to solve a solution and make money for the company, So what DevOps is not is a one fit for everything or one purpose for everything. It's not. I've been and in the market today, whether you're in England or America or anywhere else in the world, everybody has their own interpretation of what DevOps is. And that's the annoying bit. Because you can read something and go, oh, I think that means this. So I'm not going to read to you what Wikipedia actually has about DevOps. What I'm hoping to do is give you the mindset and understanding of when you go for a DevOps role, or if you're being interviewed for DevOps, the first question you should really ask is to the person who's interviewing you, what's your interpretation of DevOps? Because then you will be able to understand what that company wants from you. So I'm doing a gig at the moment for a very lovely company, New Signature. Really, I love working for these guys, and I'm doing this work for their clients. Now, on a regular day, these are the things that I touch, and I have to be able to have the ability of fixing them. So on a regular day, it's Red Hat Linux, Docker, Kubernetes, PowerShell, Bash, Ansible, Terraform, AWS, Google Cloud, Python, Git, Nutanix, blockchain. Now, I go through a lot of paracetamol, Panadol during the week because of the amount of focus that you must have and context switching that you're doing on a regular day. And what I don't think a lot of people appreciate is that not only the amount of knowledge that you actually have to consume on a regular day, you don't really have the option of saying, I'm comfortable with this thing. You can't say that. You need to be able to do, right, here's some code. How do I actually go about understanding how C# works, .NET works, PowerShell works, Python works, over, and it's just you need to be able to understand these things. So when you go for a role, or when you're in the DevOps arena, and somebody is saying to you, here's, and they're interviewing for a DevOps role, the first thing you ask is, what's your interpretation of DevOps? Because their interpretation and your interpretation is completely different. So let's give you 3 examples, really. I worked for a company at one point who just basically said, right, we are looking for a DevOps engineer. I was like, cool. And I didn't ask any questions because I assumed that they know, and I assumed that they appreciate what DevOps was. So I said, okay, sure. They were like, right, we use, at the point in time it was VSTS, which is our DevOps now, or ADO. And we've got ARM templates, and we want to deploy infrastructure as a code. Not a problem. I could do that. When I started the job on day one, I was just like, right, where are the developers? Who's the Scrum Master? Where's the Kanban board? None of that was there. So it's just like, well, all those are things that are essential for DevOps. So if they're not there, what am I really doing? Oh, we just want you to deploy these virtual machines in here. Oh, you want an automated engineer, or you wanted a, just basically it's just an engineer. And that's what they wanted. It wasn't DevOps. They interpreted that was DevOps, not DevOps. So the second place I went to work is that they had developers, and then they had infrastructure. All right. So devs and operations, DevOps, they had it. So I asked the question this time, well, what's your interpretation of DevOps? What are you hoping for a particular person to achieve for this role that's being interviewed? So they're like, well, we just basically will hope that someone will have the ability of working in our operations team and be able to, if we wanted to have X amount of virtual machines deployed, or we want to change this to a VNet, or if we want changes to a network security group. I'm talking about Azure here, or Azure for some people. And we want someone who has the ability of, fixing these things, or deploying these things, or amending these things, and do this in code, and doing this in Git. I was like, okay, no problem. That sounds more of an engineer role, I'm saying to myself, not to them. It's just like, I understand where you're coming from. You want me to be able to work in a role where I'm doing deployment. And they were like, yeah. I was just like, so there's no interaction between me and developers? They're like, no, we don't do that. We get the architects to do that. They do design and then they feed it to the other guys. I was just like, okay, no problem. Now once you got that mindset as to like what they want, now you know what to frigging do, right? Because it's just like, you don't want to go in there assuming on day one that you're working at DevOps, because again, there was no Scrum Master. There was no agile processes. There was nothing in regards to like what DevOps is supposed to be. And guess what? I have been doing DevOps for the last 2-3 years. I have done 10 different roles. I've worked for several different companies, and everybody has a different interpretation of what DevOps is. So, what is DevOps really? What do DevOps engineers do? They make things happen. That's what DevOps engineers are there for, really. Forget the real definition of DevOps, because there are companies out there, don't get me wrong, there are companies out there, I could assume like Google, I know for sure, their practice of DevOps is quite tight and quite real. And I've interviewed for Google, and let me tell you, when they were interviewing for DevOps and they were asking me all these cool questions and stuff, I was just like, yeah, I need to up my game, because I know infrastructure quite well, but when it comes to actually the development side, you need, as a DevOps person for Google or Facebook and these other companies, you need to actually be proper DevOps, understanding Scrum, what backlog, what PBIs are, all these sort of things. So those are the two elements. But what DevOps engineers really do? Get things working, get things happening, automate as much as possible. The end all, do all of everything, which includes not only do you need to write in code, infrastructure as a code, whether it's PowerShell, ARM template, Bash, Terraform, you need to understand infrastructure, some security issues, and it all depends on the size of the company you're going for. You could be finding that you do a lot more in smaller companies, especially a startup, which I've done, which is quite exciting, intense, and quick. You end up being a person with broad amount of knowledge and skills and deploying, or you could be a very specialist and niche when it comes to like understanding, Git, understanding repos, understanding pipelines, but then you could be very niche and go into like the Kubernetes side of things with Docker, understanding some applications. But not really understanding the infrastructure or how SQL works or Cosmos DB. So yeah, if you're going for a role, if you want to know what DevOps really is, ask the person who's interviewing what's their interpretation of DevOps. Because on day one, you're in for a surprise. Hope that makes sense. See you soon.